Today on the Life Science Success Podcast, I get to welcome Dave Bjork. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Don.
Oh, absolutely. And first, can you tell listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Dave Bjork, and I'm a lung cancer survivor, patient advocate, and research evangelist, and that pretty much kind of describes everything that informs my work. Currently, my background actually started in finance, and before my lung cancer diagnosis 20 years ago, I was working in finance at the Bank of Ireland, and really the cancer experience, changed me and impacted me, and I wanted to do something more impactful with my work that was more relevant to my cancer experience. And so, for the past 20 years, I've been involved with working with pharma companies on patient education programs. I've been involved with patient advocacy as far as helping patients understand their diagnosis and get informed treatments. So currently, I just started a company called Research Evangelist LLC, and I'm currently working consulting with Metadata Solutions as a patient design team member and helping bring the patient voice to clinical trials. And I'm also advising a company called Grit Health on their patient empowerment strategy and program to help patients become much more proactive in their own care. And as you may know, I have a podcast that I started called The Research Evangelist, which is interviewing people in life sciences who are doing amazing work in cancer research. So I'm happy to be here, and thanks again for having me, Don.
Yeah, it's funny given kind of the podcast foundation of where we're at, right? I kind of feel responsible for going around and checking out other podcasts in the space. And I've been asked before, so which ones do you recommend? And I know yours is definitely one. There are quite a few of them where it's a bunch of talking heads that are maybe editors or publishers in the space. I think all of that's fine. They definitely provide a different perspective, but yours being the patient's view and starting with that view and kind of working to convey that is a totally different perspective, and I definitely respect your podcast as well, and so thanks for doing what you do with that especially.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I do, I do try to bring that patient perspective. I don't intend to be the one who's doing a symposium or deep dive into research. I don't have a research or scientific background. I'm a business development guy, so for me, it's that credibility and authenticity that I try to bring to my show, that when I'm interviewing people and sharing their stories, I'm talking to, cancer researchers or members of the life science community in biotech or pharma, or from genomic testing companies and so forth. So it's really I think I'm trying to be a little bit different and use what works for me and what I think is a necessary voice for science.
And I think kind of given everything that's happened, with COVID as well, we've kind of seen the importance of needing to convey science and what's happening in science as well to just a broad general public. I mean, in some of these ideas aren't necessarily easy to break down for people, but at the same time, I'm also not a researcher, but I definitely have worked very closely with a lot of, I feel like, brilliant people. And so, oftentimes I have to break things down, as well, just for myself. So yeah, it's great to have that view. So tell me a little bit about, your diagnosis itself. I mean, what happened and, what kind of led, to your diagnosis, and then what was your treatment, because I would imagine that leads more into kind of the things that you're doing today as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's so true. I was diagnosed over 20 years, about 20 years ago. And what happened was I was a 34-year-old non-smoker who had a pretty healthy lifestyle, played basketball at the Y every day during lunch in Woburn, Mass. And I got pneumonia. Went to saw my primary care doctor, basically said, you have young kids. My kids at the time were 5, 3, and 1 years old, 3 boys. And he said, exposed to a lot of germs and you work hard, and, so just here's your antibiotics, and, sent me on my way. About six months later, I got pneumonia again. And so again, I went to see my doctor, and it was the same thing. I mean, and this is not a criticism of primary care physicians, because lung cancer doesn't really rise up to, a concern that somebody would have for somebody that fit my profile as a non-smoker. And so fortunately, a radiologist noticed that the infection in my lungs was in the same place both times. And so he recommended to my doctor that I follow up with a CAT scan, and that's when they found a tumor that was causing the infection. And so from that, it was neuroendocrine cancer. The only treatment at the time was lobectomy. It was removal of half of my left lung, which I did have done at Mass General Hospital. And I came out of that, Don, really with it was a very difficult experience. I did not have metastatic disease, so I was very fortunate. So I came out thinking I'm going to live a life of gratitude, and I'm going to, do something more impactful. And so it did inform the work I was doing, from working in finance and business development to, how about doing something like providing patient education, and making that available on the internet, to people, no matter where you lived or what your diagnosis was. And that was kind of the great equalizer at the time. This is like in the early 2000s. And so being from Minnesota and having relatives who live in rural parts of the state, I thought, well, that would be something I think that everybody could benefit from. So I did that, for many years, and started meeting a lot more other cancer patients. But I was pretty quiet for a long time, to be quite honest, because I had a positive experience, and many people at that time period, there were not targeted treatments or immunotherapy available for lung cancer patients.
Sure.
And so I didn't talk much about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not surprising, right? I mean, and it's kind of interesting though, to always to hear the journey that people go through, and sort of, I guess the other part of this is, when you experience cancer, in addition to all the other stress that you must have, you've got to try and figure out the path. How do I go forward? What do I talk about? What don't I talk about? Who do I talk to, talk to overall, and who can help me, with any of these things? Or am I just, truly in this alone? All of those things I've heard from different patients that I've talked to in the past, that, this is brand new sort of landscape that they're having to navigate, on their own.
Yeah. And in my experience, right after that, because I was not in current treatment, because I did not have metastatic disease, and I had to go back for bronchoscopies and follow-ups and things of scanning to, for that. But because I wasn't in active treatment, it really wasn't until I started working with pharma companies, in medical marketing. That's what I did when I first came out of that experience. I went to work for a company called Cancer Consultants, and we were working with pharmaceutical companies to develop programs for nonprofits and private practice oncology clinics, to educate patients. And then I started to meet more people. And then I started. One of those clients actually hired me. Was a nonprofit client. The National Foundation for Cancer Research hired me to come on and help with fundraising for cancer research. And so that's really when I became much more informed on the sort of academic research side of cancer research. And so that's really when 2013, 2014. I really decided that now's the time for me to start using my voice, right? Because even though I'm not a cancer patient in current treatment, I am an advocate for research and supporting people who do get a diagnosis of lung cancer. And so therefore I started my blog, I started to get active on Twitter, and really that's the journey of meeting other advocates, which is Twitter's a very powerful platform if it's used correctly, which is how I use it. And when it is used the way it's designed, you can connect with patients and researchers and medical centers, cancer centers. That's been a really fascinating part of my journey. And that's kind of led to me being more active, where I am today.
Yeah, it's funny to me, as I've sort of told people that, that I've talked to you, that, I was trying to get you here on the podcast and things like that. There's so many people that say, oh yeah, and I know Dave. as well. So it's just a great thing to essentially have that broad-based network, especially whenever you're facing something like cancer. So that leads me more or less to my next question. So as a part of your journey, you received the title of research evangelist. Can you tell me a little bit more about what earned you the title?
It's actually a great story, and I do embrace the title now, which is of course the name of my podcast, The Research Evangelist. But I was working at the National Foundation for Cancer Research, and I had met a friend of mine. His name is Keith Spiro, who's become a great friend, and he recognized that the work that I was doing is kind of reminded him of the work that that was done by Guy Kawasaki when he was named himself the evangelist for Apple back in the day. And so evangelist, not in the sense of a religious meaning, but the Greek meaning of the word is bringing the good news. And so being a champion, being an advocate, he's standing at the top of the mountaintops and saying, we need to fund research because it matters. And so I was the vice president of development at the time, and he encouraged me to embrace sort of a title of the research evangelist. Anyway, I was nominated for the Mass General 100, the MGH 100, which is a program that they were doing, recognizing 100 everyday amazing people making a difference in cancer care, treatment, advocacy, and so I was nominated as a research evangelist. And so it was really kind of cool when I went to the gala, and there was my name up on the thing as a research evangelist. And so that's how I've really embraced, the word. I was afraid at first that people might take it as a religious thing, but it's 100% not. It's just really, being a champion for research. And that means highlighting the good things that are happening. Taken, for example, in lung cancer, where it's a very devastating disease, as many people probably know, that the 5-year prognosis for advanced lung cancer is still not very good, but it's way better than it was 20 years ago, right? And so why shouldn't we be being proactive and saying that there's a lot of progress that's being made, and people are living longer lives, and their lives are being saved? So it really fits for me.
Yeah. It's, I mean, and it's one of those things where, it's great to earn yourself a title, but at the same time, the other things that come along with that is also, how do I use it responsibly and things like that. And it sounds like you've taken the right approach in terms of, really digging into the definition, really digging, behind things, and just, more or less informing people that, hey, look, this isn't meant to be anything other than, I'm a strong supporter of this, and I'm going to speak up about it. Right. So.
Yeah. And you of course, your podcast is about highlighting people in life sciences, and I'm part of that ecosystem. I've worked very hard to build credibility and authenticity with the fact that I'm not out to make $1 bajillion or whatever. I am a champion for the people, that you encounter on your show, who are starting companies, who are the scientific officers behind it, or the investors that take a risk to get behind it, because it's so difficult to bring treatments to patients. It requires an entire ecosystem. So if I'm talking to an academic researcher at Fox Chase or Mass General Hospital, who then might have an impact by partnering with a pharmaceutical or biotech company to try to bring that idea to patients, that's really exciting for me. So I'm sure you feel the same way about the role that you play.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, right? I mean, my biggest hope is that maybe somebody's on the show and maybe somebody else hears about it, and either in one way it leads to somebody telling somebody else that, hey, look, this is coming, or, maybe even better yet, it helps somebody to earn funding and not, go through the valley of death and actually experience the death of their company at the same time. And because I've asked this question on my podcast as well, which is, what happens to companies whenever they don't make it? And, I would love to say that, a lot of companies just pivot and persevere. But I also know that I've spoken to people in the past where their therapy that they were working on didn't continue forward. And so that, to me, is a bigger detriment to the overall, possible community who could benefit from it. And so that's what I would hope would come from this as well.
Definitely.
So, part of what you've done in the past also is, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, is, really be a patient advocate. What is a patient advocate, and how do you help people?
Boy, a patient advocate, to me, it's becoming a much more important phrase that's used, in life sciences. And personally, I believe that a patient advocate can mean different things to different people, right? I know patient advocates who are more like activists, right? So they're maybe in their current course of treatment, they're advocating for something very specific, an EGFR mutation of lung cancer, which they have, or something, that is really, really kind of a personal thing. So it can mean that it can be a patient advocate. My wife is a nurse. She thinks of patient advocates as someone who speaks up and asks questions and advocates for their own care for themselves, right? And I see my role as a patient advocate as, looking at it really, if you think of a research advocate, because I call it my lane. It's I'm not in current treatment, but I can be a credible champion for patients, whatever their current experience or their past experience. You could be a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Um, uh, in your diagnosis, you could be a smoker, you could be a non-smoker, or a history of smoking. And so for me, I've always championed that we're all in this together. So that's my role as a patient advocate, in telling people that you should be a champion for your own care. You can get involved with advocacy by joining a group of patients with a similar diagnosis to advance your personal health care, or you can just be a broader person like myself, who is just literally advocating for proper funding, whether it's from the government or through philanthropy or through other ways to continue to say we need to continue to support research. So I really think I'm a patient research advocate, in that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's the one thing that it brings to mind for me is that finding. So let's say if you are like yourself, a non-smoker, who all of a sudden has lung cancer, um, how many other people are like me might be a question that could run through your head. And it sure would be nice to have somebody that's walked that path before. And as I, I certainly have, I use Facebook for, hobby sort of things. I use LinkedIn oftentimes for, business related things. I've just started using Twitter, now that I have my own consulting business, which I never used before. I used it very seldom. And, but, I can certainly see where there are collections of people that use Twitter, like you said, for kind of a broader community connection space, and it's an opportunity for people to connect. But it sure would be nice to have people, that would tell you, here's where you might be able to connect to people like yourself online, and then also, possibly even in person, be able to share some sort of connection as well would be nice.
Yeah, I'll tell you, and I tell people all the time that I've met so many people on Twitter, who I then go on to meet in person, at before COVID, at different events around the country. But as I said, if you use it properly and you just being authentic and you try to connect with people, I mean, I'm connected to dozens of oncologists and nurses and some CEOs of biotech companies and Dana Farber and City of Hope Hospital in California, the CEO, and so it's just a really great way to. I advise people to do that. I advise people to you get a diagnosis and you want to find support, you want to find other people like you. If you just put your story out on Twitter and not be afraid, of connecting with people that you don't know, it can be a very rewarding experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so for anybody that is happening to watch on YouTube, I can see over one of your shoulders, you have a white ribbon over your shoulder. What is that organization? What is the white ribbon for, that's over your shoulder?
Oh, thanks. So here it is. I have to say it's a grassroots movement that I've never encountered in my entire life. It's called the White Ribbon Project. It's a grassroots movement of lung cancer patients, caregivers, advocates, cancer centers, clinicians, and researchers who want to change the public perception of lung cancer by raising awareness that anybody with lungs can get lung cancer. And so it's a non-branded, inclusive group of people. It started with a woman in Colorado who was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer as a health educator, and her husband's a doctor, primary care doctor with a master's in public health. And they were just caught flat-footed by the whole thing. And she wanted to, she said, I want people to know that I have lung cancer. There's no shame in having lung cancer, whether you have a history of smoking or not. Right. It's inclusive. It does not matter. Nobody deserves to get lung cancer, but the stigma is that you probably brought on yourself, or whatever. And so her husband built a white ribbon in his wood shop because she wanted something. And so it's literally come to symbolize, that I have lung cancer. And it's like the Humans of New York. It's people. They've made over 1,000 ribbons have been made now.
Wow.
They're made of wood. I mean, they're handcrafted. And we say they're made with love and handed to someone with love as support, and say, you just got diagnosed with lung cancer, or you have a loved one, or you lost a loved one. Here's a ribbon. There's many of us out there who support you and love you. So it's just a fascinating journny. Again, it's called the White Ribbon Project. That's the hashtag on Twitter, the White Ribbon Project.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah. It literally is so cool. It's something, like I said, it's because the people who started it didn't set out to start a viral campaign or do some slick marketing. They literally said, I'm just going to put a ribbon on my front door and I'll tell some other people about it. And then people started saying, hey, Pierre, their names are Pierre and Heidi Onda. Can I get a ribbon? And and that's how I heard about it. I'm like, so I got one. So I'm going to Mass General tomorrow to give one to Dr. Henning Willers, who's the chief of thoracic radiation oncology at Mass General Hospital, and he is going to proudly represent the white ribbon. So it's been really cool.
That is just an excellent story overall of building a tribe of your own.
Talk about advocacy. Talk about patient advocacy, right? From the grassroots.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you think face cancer patients and potential survivors?
Oh boy. I think it's really from the diagnosis, everybody needs to find support, that you need to find, everyone's situation is different. My wife is a nurse, so I had a caregiver who was very knowledgeable, but not everybody has that, right? Not everybody has. And so you got to lean on people. You got to lean on your family. You got to lean on your friends, and it's one thing I always say when people say, oh, anything we can do to help. Well, people don't offer help unless they really would help you. And so don't be afraid to take up, help. And then get educated, and that's part of it. It's fine whether it's for yourself or you have somebody that's going to be your guide to help you through the process to, what am I going to do now? Because when you hear I have, you have cancer, it's like your world just stops, right? And after that, sometimes you don't hear anything else. You just hear noise, and somebody has to help you through that process. Like, where am I going to get treated? Who do I talk to? Who do I turn to? Do I go to my primary care? Should I go get treated in a community place because I live in a rural setting, or do I have to go to a big hospital and I don't want to travel? There's just so many considerations. So I think those are some of the, the initial challenges, and then just kind of staying on top of it, whatever your outcome, presents different challenges to different people. As I mentioned earlier, some people, particularly in lung cancer, are having to go on a monthly or quarterly or basis to continue to be treated, because they're in stage 4, and so they're literally dying, and so they have to find out about clinical trials, and oh my gosh, there's just the landscape can be so complicated, right? So I guess I would just advise people to ask for help and don't try to do it by yourself.
Yeah, it's not a common thing for a lot of us, right, to reach out and say that we do need help, but in this case, again, having that support network around you, whether they are part of your treatment process or not, is important, regardless. So there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
Oh, there's probably a lot of things that inspire me, but I think the first thing that comes to my mind is relative to this conversation, relative to, to my work, is I'm inspired by, the people, in science, whatever that is, whether it's a clinician or as a researcher, is I'm inspired by the stories of these people and how they got to be where they are, how they overcome challenges. It could be a Hispanic woman, who becomes an oncologist like Narjas Duma, who I just heard is going to Dana-Farber, um, and the lifetime commitment that they make. Like after the marathon bombing in Boston, the Boston Marathon, there were these surgeons, who were going on these shifts. They'd be like for 16 hours and then they'd go sleep for an hour and then they're back. And I'm just like that level of commitment just inspires me because I don't know that I could do that. And it's, they're very special people. But that could go to, people in the military, who are flying, Black Hawk helicopters or whatever. But I guess it's just people who just have that, that commitment that is just so beyond what the average person, would be willing to commit, but it's for the better of society. It's, it's not self-serving. It's they're helping people.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, for sure. That is a calling in a lot of cases. There's some underlying reason why they're just going to apply all of their energy and all of their effort, even whenever they're exhausted, to try and carry things forward. So we do need people like that, a lot of people like that in life sciences, especially, and definitely in oncology.
Mm.
What concerns you?
I would say the biggest thing from my experience, particularly over the last 8 years, and really getting to understand the research ecosystem, and this is really more on the in the academic side, and not so much as on the industry side. But I worry about two things. I worry about losing young people to research, and I worry on a broader basis of us losing sort of the research funding that we need to be competitive in a world that has other countries that are investing billions of dollars in research. And so I get concerned if people talk about cutting back on research or not understanding that the research that's invested today will benefit our society 20 years from now. Just like immunotherapy is a great example. The investments that were made in immunotherapy years ago, well, now immunotherapy is just sort of everyone knows about it, but it didn't just happen, right? And so if we and funding young people, these postdocs that they just invested 8 years, and they want to stay in research, but it's so hard, to get for laboratories to get funding to support those young people. So I worry that they give up and they do something else. Well, what brilliant ideas might not happen because we lose a generation of young people who could be those game changers that we read about today,
right?
Who are the more experienced researchers. You know what I mean? So
yeah. It's, I mean, I don't think that that it's very commonly understood how far in advance people have to work on a lot of the science, the base science, to be able to carry one of these things to the point where you're actually going to see something in a treatment. I mean, it's years and years, decades sometimes invested in, trying to do this. And, we're right now, at the cusp of talking about a lot of overall having a lot of, like monoclonal antibodies and biological treatments. But with those things were developed years and years ago, but it's taken kind of this long where you're starting to see kind of, more and more of them in the space now. And then I kind of, think about the future with personalized medicine and some of the diagnostic treatments and other things that people are working on today. And you have kind of that same scenario again, that it's going to take years to be able to bring these things to market. And it starts with the universities and the people who are, postdocs who are really interested in the base science and carrying some of the stuff forward.
Totally. And of course, and your listeners know, I'm sure, about the COVID vaccine, and it's been amazing to see how how the biotech and pharma community really came together in the past year to bring those to life. But we know that didn't happen in the last year. It happened over years of research, right? So I think that's a good example.
Yeah, I think a lot of the companies, I mean, that were able to accelerate that vaccine development, they did it on the back of Ebola and SARS and MERS. I mean, it was done on the back of other sort of infections. So, I think the whole process was brought about by that. But again, it all started in some lab somewhere. Somebody actually started, their research years and years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Dave, what excites you?
Boy, I'll mention two things. The White Ribbon Project completely excites me because I've never seen a grassroots movement where people are really trying to once and for all change the public perception of a disease that's had a stigma forever. Ever since they did the Great American Smoke Out and all the tobacco company settlements and all of that stuff, that it helped to reduce the incidence of smoking. Sure. But it also kind of created this stigma. So I'm excited about that. And I think from the scientific standpoint, there are 7 biomarkers now for non-small cell lung cancer, right? And that have targeted treatments, right? And so you have that, and you have immunotherapy strategies, and all of the things that have happened over the past, particularly the last 3 to 5 years in lung cancer research. It's very exciting to me. Because I feel like, what you just mentioned with precision medicine, with this genomic profiling and the advances that are going to be happening in KRAS, right. And all this, as a target, and, HER2 and non-small cell lung cancer, and all these things are happening. We just got to keep going. So I'm just excited about being a part of that. And, again, to the people who are committed to, making these advancements happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. And, Dave Bjork, thank you so much for spending time with me here on the podcast. I hope that people will come and visit your Research Evangelist podcast as well and check it out. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing in this space. And just thanks again.
Thanks, Don. And thank you for everything that you're doing as well. It's really, really great to be on your show. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.